past the clouds, over the dark night. She reached up to the sky of stars and caught the red-hot light of the North Star.
Good afternoon and welcome back. As always, today's headline at Electronic Intifada reads, Israel kills children routinely in West Bank. Israel is subjecting Palestinian children in the occupied West Bank to a campaign of systematic ethnic cleansing, according to a human rights group. Since the beginning of the year, Israel has killed 20 children in the West Bank. Very simply put, folks, these are war crimes. Killing children, bombing hospitals, targeting doctors, withholding aid, collective punishment are war crimes. Why are they doing this? Let's connect some dots and find out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.
Welcome to the Connecting the Dots podcast with Dr. Wilmer Leon, and I am Wilmer Leon. Here's the point. We have a tendency to view current events as though they take place in a vacuum, failing to understand the broader historic context in which most events take place. During each episode, my guests and I have probing, provocative, and in-depth discussions that connect the dots between these events and the broader historical context in which they occur, thus enabling you to better understand and analyze these events that are impacting the global village in which we live. On today's episode, the issue before us is, in the latest case of murdering children, it is reported this past Sunday, Israeli soldiers shot 3 Palestinian children, including 2 with American citizenship, in the town of Tor Musaya. One of the 3 died as a result. None of this, of course, was mentioned today during the president's press conference as he discussed how well negotiations are going with Hamas. My guest has taught international human rights at the University of Pittsburgh School of Law since 2012. He's the author of a number of books, the latest, The Case for Palestine, Why It Matters and Why You Should Care. Professor Dan Kovalik, and by the way, folks, really nice guy. Professor Dan Kovalik, as always, welcome back.
Thank you, Wilmer. Really glad to be on your show. By the way, I have a new book in the works for Jeremy Kuzmarov. It's going to be called Syria: Anatomy of a Regime Change. That's going to come out September 1st, and you're the first person I'm telling this to. Oliver Stone has agreed to do the foreword to the book, so I'm quite excited about that.
Well, thank you for that breaking news, and I look forward to the interview when the book with you and Jeremy when the book is released. Thank you, Dan. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
So the town's mayor said the 3 boys were picking green almonds from a field near Route 60, a highway used by Israeli settlers that crosses the West Bank. Palestinian American Amr Rabi, 14, was killed by Israeli fire. Israeli soldiers shot his 15-year-old friend, Ayub Jabbar, also an American citizen, and he was placed in intensive care following the attack. Another friend, Abdul Rahman Shahada, 15, was hospitalized as well. A couple of things just come out of that one paragraph. One, Highway 60 is Route 60 is a highway used by Israeli settlers. A lot of people need to understand that there are many highways in that region that are banned, that Palestinians cannot traverse through. First point. Also, they're now shooting American citizens who are children. Professor Dan Kovalik.
We've reached a new level of depravity. Meanwhile, I was reading in Gaza, 100 children are being killed a day, okay, by Israel. And as you say, in the West Bank, children are being killed. Children are being arrested. By the way, they just lowered the age of children that they are willing to arrest to, I believe, 12 years old now. And these children are tortured. Many are raped. As you say, no one is off limits now. They're killing American citizens. Recall also that the Palestinian who had about 2 weeks before been holding the Academy Award in his hand for best documentary, they tried to lynch him in the West Bank, and he was beaten up, arrested. He did survive it, but no one's off limits. Nothing is off limits to do to people. Israel has crossed every red line imaginable. And the U.S. has been there with Israel for every step. In fact, I just saw this morning there's a report, and I forget who reported it, but it was revealed that Israel was quite surprised that the Biden administration allowed it to continue the war in Gaza as long as it did. It thought the U.S. would put its foot down after a few weeks and say, okay, boys, that's enough. And that never happened. And of course, there was a couple pauses, and now the murders are back, and Trump seems totally willing to let it keep going. So the U.S. has even surprised Israel with how permissive it's been in allowing Israel to use its weaponry, the U.S. weaponry and munitions, to engage in these atrocities.
I have been, as you know, I've been teaching international law this semester, and you know that because I was trying to use your book as the text for my class. I'm using this book from the second book you suggested from Oxford, and in that book, they spend a lot of time on the Nuremberg trials, and in reading that section of the book, one of the concepts that came out during the Nuremberg trial was this, and I think this was new to that time, was the concept of total war.
Right.
And I've been talking about that now in the context of the atrocities, the genocide that the Zionist government has been inflicting upon the Palestinians. And I think if you could take just a minute and elaborate on that idea and how horrific of an idea of total war. It's a no holds barred, nothing is off limits, no parameters, scorched earth. We're just here to kill, to maim, and to destroy.
Yes. Well, first of all, I think, and I've thought about this a bit. Yes, of course we in our minds, and I think there was some truth to it. If you look at, for example, the American Revolutionary War, or even the Civil War, we think of soldiers firing at each other, right? They're in lines and they fire at each other across a hill, and people are actually, civilians, women and children are out there actually watching it happen, right? They're spectators, right? And for the most part, those civilians were not shot at, right? The soldiers, it was a very, in many ways, very
controlled.
Almost a controlled or orderly kind of war. Now,
wait a
everyone
minute,
said,
Dan, wait a minute, because to that point, This just came to mind. Going around the line and sneaking up behind the enemy and shooting them from behind was off limits because
Right.
that wasn't manly.
Right. Now, what we should say, though, and of course, everyone will say that that all ended with World War One, which was the first total war. In a sense, it was, in the sense that it was the first modern war in which cities were not off limits. You could destroy whole cities. Yes, you could bomb whole cities with civilians in them, destroy civilian infrastructure, that sort of thing. Though it should be said, and this is what relates to what's happening in Israel Palestine, that total war was always permitted against indigenous people, right? So if you look at, for example, the indigenous people in North America, the white people who came engaged in total war against them. They would murder women and children. They would rape women. They would, again, there were no limits. Okay, we should put that caveat
Thank you.
there. And the war against the Palestinians looks more like that than it does even World War One or World War Two, right? Although I guess what's happening in Gaza looks like a combination of the two. But as you say, World War One was, I suppose, it breached this idea of war by going to total war, at least between white people, right? And where millions of people were killed. I mean, nothing. And of course, some of that was because of the technology. The technology allowed that in a way it never did before, right? If you have to keep putting your, one bullet at a time in your musket, you can't do the damage, right, that you can with machine guns, which were first introduced, I believe, in World War One.
Yes.
Tanks, World War One, and aerial bombings, which started, I believe, in the first time of World War One, and in World War Two, of course, became a major thing. Where again, whole cities were destroyed. And of course, the World War Two is punctuated by the use of nuclear weapons on Japan. By the way, little fun fact for you, Wilmer. I was reading at one point that the Wright brothers, who invented the airplane, that they believed. Recall that the first planes, of course, could only fit one or two people in them, right? So the Wright brothers believed that their planes were only viable for warfare, to drop bombs. They didn't conceive that they'd be used to carry people, right? Because again, they couldn't carry many people besides the pilot, right? And maybe one other person. So, it's important to think about most of our innovations in technology have been to kill people, including the airplane, which is a pretty incredible thing. But again, once you had the airplane and had the ability to bomb people from above, which is pretty much at this point in Gaza, all that's being done, right? There were, in round one under the Biden administration, there was some more, ground battles between Hamas and the IDF. Now, because the IDF, lost a number of soldiers there to being killed and also severely wounded, and many people who came back committed suicide, it was very devastating for the Israelis. It looks like they're not going to do that anymore. All they're going to do is engage in aerial bombings. They're just bombing people in tents from above. And of course, Hamas has no anti-aircraft weapons, has no air force of its own. So, I mean, Israel controls the skies and can just bomb at will. And that's what's exactly happening there.
This is so, the Army called these three children, 112, 114, and 115, terrorists, and they show a few seconds of grainy footage allegedly capturing the moment they were shot. I believe that is a war crime as well. And please correct me if I'm wrong. And the Israeli army didn't even try to claim that the boys were throwing anything other than rocks. They said Israeli soldiers, quote, identified 3 terrorists who hurled rocks toward the highway, thus endangering civilians driving. And again, there's zero response, because today the president held a press conference and talking about the hostages that you're still trying, that the United States is still trying to negotiate the release of, talked about how well those negotiations are going, and this issue wasn't raised by the media.
No, again, the media doesn't care. We have to face that. The media has become completely inured to what's happening in terms of this. Yeah, of course, it's a war crime. I mean, first of all, I don't believe they threw stones. They always claim that.
Right.
Even if they did, under the rules of war, any use of force has to be proportionate to the threat. Shooting a child who's throwing stones is not proportionate to the threat.
Right. You throw stones back at the kids.
Or you arrest them or whatever. You don't
Right.
just summarily execute them, which is what is happening. And again, it's lies anyway. I doubt if they were even throwing stones. You know, I saw a video today, quite disturbing, also in the West Bank, of an IDF soldier. He throws a young Palestinian woman on the ground. She falls to the ground. He then turns on his heels and he kicks her in the head as hard as he could, as if he were like a kicker trying to kick a field goal. And God knows what that did to her, you know, in terms of brain damage or whatever. But again, she wasn't doing anything. She was already on the ground. She was no threat to anybody, and she wouldn't have been a threat anyway. This is just unfettered violence. The whole point of this is to terrorize the Palestinian population. The whole point is to destroy, and I'm going to quote the Genocide Convention of 1948, to destroy in whole or in part the Palestinian people. Netanyahu has decided that this is Israel's last opportunity. It's their final solution. And I would never have used those words before. Of course, Hitler's final solution was the Holocaust. But this is similar. Israel believes its final solution now, because they know that their society's collapsing, their economy's collapsing, they know the world hates them. So their final solution is to destroy the Palestinian people. They've decided they're going to get rid of them one way or another. They're going to kill a bunch, they're going to starve a bunch, and the rest they're going to push out. At least that's the plan. And the U.S. has decided it's going to help them do that. And, you know, Trump has been very open. Biden also was helping with that. And again, behind the scenes, the plan, for example, in Gaza was to push all the people of Palestine, into the Sinai Peninsula of Egypt. But again, that was not stated openly by the Biden administration. Trump is now saying openly he is going to move all the people of Palestine, at least of Gaza, into other countries, and he's trying to work that out. The UAE's now agreed, I think, to take 100,000. They're going to try to prevail on Syria to take 500,000. They're going to, you know, and what they're calling it is a voluntary emigration, because they're saying, well, sorry guys, you know, you can't live here anymore because we've destroyed the place. There's no way to live here. No one can live here. It's like living on a moonscape. So you can voluntarily leave. Well, that's not voluntary, right? I mean, these types of words are meaningless, right? I mean, if I come to your home and I, at gunpoint, say you got to leave your home, that is not voluntary. You're not leaving voluntarily. There's no greater coercion than what they're doing.
It's the Trail of Tears again.
Yeah, but even much more brutal and Yeah, again, we've never seen these sorts of things have happened in history. We know that, but not, first of all, not videotaped like this. I mean, not so that you could watch it every single day, which you can on social
Mhm.
media. No one can deny that they don't know what's happening, even if they don't see those videos. If you don't know that it's happening, you should know, right? I mean, you
Mhm.
really are obligated to know. That's what makes it different. But also, yes, I mean, again, there's a number of ways in which, particularly what's happening in Gaza, is unique. I mean, it has now the greatest number of children killed in any conflict in years, the greatest number of children who have lost limbs, I believe, of any conflict ever, the most number of journalists killed ever in any conflict, even World War II, the most number of UN workers ever killed in any conflict, the most number of doctors killed ever in any conflict. I mean, this is really, and it's a tiny area. This
Mhm.
World
Mhm.
War II covered, everywhere from Great Britain through the Soviet Union, right? I mean, it
Mhm.
was huge, and also in parts of Africa, right? So on this little tiny space, you're having, uh, you know, they're setting records for these types of atrocities. It's really something to behold. And who would have thought, coming into the 21st century, with all the talk about human rights, right? I
Mhm.
mean, all of us, the discourse of human rights is now a very common discourse, right? I mean,
So it's
it's not,
trite.
what's that?
It's a very trite discourse.
Yes. But like everyone knows that in the U.S. always used to talk about human rights, and Europe always used to talk about human rights, and now it's a joke. It's a fucking joke. Sorry, um, they're just throwing out every rule of war, every human rights instrument. They're just being thrown out the window, and yeah, it's hard to watch. I mean, it's a terrible thing,
Mhm.
and I don't think anyone should get used to it. And I would not urge people to get used to it or tell people, oh, don't worry. You should be worried about it. You should be losing sleep about this.
Mhm. Adrian Dittman says Dan is a man of knowledge and peace. Salute to him. And that
Oh,
that is
thank you.
that
Thank
is
you for saying that. That
that is
means a
very
lot
clear.
to me.
That
Thank
is
you
very
very,
clear.
very much.
Cherie wants to know if you have seen the documentary Sacrificing Liberty about the USS Liberty naval ship. Um, uh, I have seen it. Folks should see it
Yeah.
because it gives, again, connecting the dots. Thank you, Cherie. It gives um, a much broader historic context to what we are dealing with now.
Yeah,
Um,
and what it shows is Israel is the worst ally anyone could have. I mean, if this is again, if that's a, if Israel's a friend, I'd hate to see our enemies. I mean, they drag us into one war after the other. Again, they shoot up this ship of American servicemen, and they knew who they were in the case of the USS Liberty. Israel's not a friend; they're a frenemy. It's amazing.
Senator Cory Booker last week spent 25 hours in the well on the Senate floor, and he went through what I consider to be a performance art. He spent a lot of time talking about morality, and he broke Strom Thurmond's 24 hours. Strom Thurmond engaged in a shoot. Now I'm drawing a blank on the word. Um, when you
Filibuster,
filibuster.
filibuster.
Thank you,
Yeah,
thank you. Cory Booker's was not a filibuster because there was no legislation that he was in opposition to, and there was no nomination that he was in opposition to. So he's just, that's a point that those of us that know these things say these things. Um, um, but he was down there for 25 hours. Talked about morality. Not one mumbling word. In fact, he said, this is a moral moment that America is facing, this moral moment, and morality must carry the day. Not one word about Gaza. Not one word about genocide. Not one word about our tax dollars and our logistical support making us complicit in a genocide. And then you see pictures of him standing there with, I think there was a picture of him and Netanyahu when Netanyahu was here last week. And ironically, I see Netanyahu and Strom Thurmond as being ideologically related. In fact, I asked last night I said on Mark Lamont Hill show, you ever seen Strom Thurmond and Benjamin Netanyahu in the same place at the same time? No, because they're the same person.
That's great.
So, Senator Booker, enough of the performance art. Give us something substantive, Dan Kovalik.
Yes, and I also believe he's voted multiple times to approve arms shipments to Israel, even as this genocide is happening. No, I mean, the silence is deafening. By the way, around the same time, Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the UN, gave a speech on the UN floor about genocide and how terrible it is. He didn't mention Gaza. And so, yeah, the world is looking away while this is happening. And that's why it's happening, right?
Right.
It is happening because people are allowing it to happen. People who should know better, people who should be better. It's that Martin Luther King quote, that when good men do nothing, evil will prevail. I'm just paraphrasing, but it's very true, and that's what's happening.
Isaac T. Studio, are we entering a new era of McCarthyism under the predicate of anti-Semitism? Dan Kovalik.
Yes, absolutely. That's a great question. That's absolutely what's happening. Professors are losing their jobs over this. We have 300 guest students here who are being deported or in deportation proceedings over their opposition to the war in Gaza. People are being harassed at airports over this. There's no question. In fact, I would say, in truth, this is worse than the McCarthy period, because the McCarthy period, as bad as it was mostly limited to attacking people in Hollywood. That was their main focus. This is a much broader attack on society.
Looks like we have lost Professor Kovalik for a moment, and we'll work to reestablish that connection. I think he was making the point to Isaac's question about. There we go. Let's see if I can bring him back here. Can I? There we go. We got you. Go ahead, Dan.
Sorry about that. Sorry. I'm sorry about that. Can you see me?
Yes, go ahead. Yeah,
okay, great. Yeah, so what I was saying is it's even worse than the McCarthy period, which was largely focused on Hollywood, trying to purge Hollywood of actors, directors, etc., who were leftists, either communist or communist adjacent. This is a much broader campaign against the population. And in that sense, I think it's worse. And I do think it's going to grow. I think that, right now they are focused a lot on, visa holders. but I think you will see much more persecution of citizens as well. I mean, and you saw there, there was a statement, was it by Trump himself, I think, saying that, in terms of the deportation of people to El Salvador, to these horrible prisons, that he may be interested in sending citizens there. This is a slippery slope, right? More and more people are going to get caught up in this. More and more people. And, well, again, when you look at what's happening to these visa holders, these students who uh, are in deportation proceedings because they spoke out for Palestine, they're being disappeared, right? The one guy at Columbia was sent to, where was it? Texas, I think, or
Oh,
Louisiana.
he was sent to Louisiana.
To Louisiana, and then you had the woman, another student. She was just taken off the street because of an op-ed she wrote in a student newspaper, and she was disappeared. I mean, this is really, um, this is what we expect from fascist governments in the third world, right? But this is happening now, and again, if it can happen to those people, it can happen to citizens, and that is, you know and there's no question that Trump is going to keep trying to move this farther and farther and see how far he can go in terms of shutting down dissent.
Now, I said, and those on this show can validate this, when that group of Venezuelans was sent to El Salvador, I came on this show as well as my Sirius XM show and said, this is a trial balloon, that this is not about Venezuelans to El Salvador. This is a test of the 14th Amendment and due process.
Right.
And if Donald Trump can get away with sending Venezuelans to El Salvador, Americans will be next. And that this was a test of the due process clause. This has nothing. This was a trial balloon, is
Right.
what I was saying. And what does Trump say? To your point, Dan, what does Trump say 2 days ago? And reported by USA Today, Trump on sending American prisoners to El Salvadorian prisons. I love that. He told reporters he would be in favor of sending American prisoners to El Salvador. He doesn't know what the law says on that. Folks, this is not that hard to figure out. The plays that these guys are making, and women, Pam Bondi and the crew, they're telegraphing their passes, their punches. Dan.
Yeah, no, I mean, first of all, it turns out 75% of the Venezuelans sent to El Salvador had no criminal record.
Correct.
Okay, they didn't do anything. One guy we know, they thought he was a Venezuelan gang member because of a tattoo he had. Turned out he had a autism awareness tattoo.
Well, you know how those autistic folks, how gangster they can be.
Yeah. And can you imagine him being put in this situation with autism, what he's suffering right now? And by the way,
they had to drop the charges. They had to drop the charges again. They said that if we're talking about the same guy, and I think we are, in Northern Virginia, they said he was the MSNBC. He was the MS-13 East Coast leader. And now they've had to withdraw the charges because he's supporting autism.
Did he get sent there, though? Did he go to El Salvador?
No.
Okay,
no.
That's good. Because once they're there, because there have been some people sent there wrongly, and the government's response is, well, we can't do anything to get them back. Once they're there. So that's where this is so dangerous, even for citizens. I always give this example. Many times I have to, I live in this multi-building unit, and I order food a lot. and for dinner, and I have to sometimes go on a scavenger hunt to find it at one of the buildings. I go out my slippers, right, without even without my wallet, right? What if they captured me and said, "Where are your papers? How do are you a citizen?" "Oh yeah, of course I am." "No, prove it." "Well, I don't, I left my wallet back there." I mean, and they grab you, right? I mean, and they send you to El Salvador
with your slippers on.
Yeah, and they say, "Oh, we can't bring him back. Sorry." And this is going to happen. This will happen to somebody, and it's really people should be very worried, and people need to fight this. This is not acceptable. And by the way, someone here on a student visa doesn't deserve to be treated that way. I mean, let's face it. I mean, they're here legally.
Which means the Constitution applies to them.
Well, that's right. At least
even if they're not here legally, right? The Constitution still applies to them.
That's right. The First Amendment is not limited to citizens. They have a First Amendment right. The guy who was sent to Louisiana is married to a U.S. citizen. She's pregnant right now with his child, and he is sitting in a prison. I believe he's still in Louisiana. There's some fight about where it's outrageous. And also, like, what is the message Trump is sending? We don't want smart people here. We're going to go after Ivy League students.
Well, he did say, "I love the uneducated."
Well, there you go. I mean, so I guess we don't want smart people to come here. The EU has put out a travel advisory to their citizens of Europe saying, "Don't go to America. This could happen to you." There was that British, do you know about the case of the British backpacker?
No.
Young woman, she had been to the U.S. before, loves the U.S. She came here, young college-age student, wanting to do a backpacking around North America, I believe, for several months. There was some mix-up with her visa at the U.S.-Canadian border. She ended up being seized by U.S. Customs and imprisoned. They don't call it a prison, but basically she was in prison. She was put in a holding cell that certainly looks like a prison, given meager food to eat and not allowed to have contact with her family or lawyer. And I don't know how that story ended, but I know the last time I checked, she had been there for a matter of a number of days. And so Europe's saying, "Don't go there. Don't go to the U.S." It's like going to, again, some type of fascist regime. You don't want to go there because they could do this to you.
Man, there are so many directions that let me see if I can find this other point here. Oh, this is from S1 Dubuzz. From what I've read this morning, a majority of American citizens now view Israel negatively for the first time. They're looking for the article. That would not surprise me, and that would give a lot of insight into why the United States has ratcheted up its attack on universities and students under the pretext of anti-Semitism. Because again, folks, I've been saying for a very long time, the Zionists are losing the argument. If you understand the difference in mission between the oppressor and the oppressed, the Israeli Defense Forces mission is to cleanse Gaza of Palestinians. The mission of the resistance is to live to fight another day. And so one could make the argument that Hamas is winning the war. Why? Because they're still there. They're losing the argument here in terms of the narrative. Hence, you had 100 Jewish Americans protesting in Trump Tower about 2 weeks ago. You had a number of Jewish students. I think they handcuffed themselves to the gate at Columbia University. So you have Not in Our Name, a number of Jewish organizations that are in support of Mahmoud Khalil and others. They're losing the argument. They're becoming more desperate. That's why they are resorting to the tactics, the unconstitutional tactics that they're resorting to, Dan Lazar. I'm sorry, Dan Kovalik.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. They cannot defend this. They know that they're wrong, by the way. And yes, even amongst Jews in the U.S., Europe, and elsewhere, Zionism is becoming quite unpopular, and many Israelis are leaving Israel. A huge percentage of Israelis, and especially professional Israelis, educated Israelis, have left permanently, never to return. Why? One, yes, they're afraid, of the military conflict, but also they know Israel's days are numbered, and they know the world hates Israel, and they don't want to be a part of it, right? It's not a very pleasant place to be anymore, and it's not a place people feel very proud of anymore. So yeah, Zionism is dying, but the problem is, and we've talked about this before. I mean, Israel's going to take a lot of people with them as they go down. I mean, I do think this project is ending, this Zionist project, but I think sadly it won't end before many people's lives are destroyed. Hopefully, it will end before there's a major conflagration in the Middle East, but that seems to be coming between the U.S. and Iran, and this is all about Israel. It's very concerning, but yes, the days of Zionism are numbered for sure.
And the adage is the last kicks of the dying mule can be the most dangerous. Staying on this issue, Trump says Israel would, quote, be the leader of strike on Iran if nuclear talks fall apart. And then he goes on to say Washington will make the decisions. Netanyahu's cabinet secretary says the prime minister was surprised that direct U.S.-Iran talks are slated for the coming weekend. This idea of trying to bait Iran into a response, such a failure, or what I mean by that is attacking Iran would have catastrophic consequences. There's no winner here. Dan.
No. I mean, I think you have to look at, when Iran, and this was right after its revolution in 1979, was forced to fight a war with Iraq. That war lasted for 8 years, and 1 million people died in that war. And Iran survived, and it was able to defeat Iraq, ultimately.
And that was Iraq acting as the U.S. proxy in that conflict.
That's right, and most of the world was supporting Iraq, and yet Iran, Iran's much stronger today, much stronger. Right, that war ended in 1988. So Iran's ready for this. I mean, they don't want it. Let's be clear, they don't want this war, but they are ready for it because they know it may come. I think you're going to see, as I said, in the Iran-Iraq war, there were about 1 million people killed. I think you could see those types of figures, and I think many Americans would die in it. And why? I mean, we have to remind our audience that there was a nuclear deal in place between the U.S. and Iran was following it. Our own intelligence agencies said Iran was abiding by it, and Trump unilaterally tore it up. And now he's threatening to have war because why? Because They're not abiding by an agreement he tore up. I mean, it's insane. This is insane.
There was a report out last week that our intelligence has reiterated they still don't have a military nuclear program.
Well, they don't want one. Both Ayatollahs, the Ayatollah Khomeini and the Ayatollah Khamenei, the current one, have issued fatwas, religious decrees, saying it is against Islam, it is against God to build and maintain and use nuclear weapons. They don't want them. They never have wanted them. They need this for energy. And people said, why do you need it for energy? You have all this oil. Because they have, very remote areas in Iran. Iran's a huge country, and they need the nuclear energy to electrify the whole country. By the way, when in the last years of the Shah, the U.S.-backed Shah,
Yep.
in the 70s, the U.S. was helping Iran with nuclear energy. General Electric was helping them
Atoms
in
for Peace
particular.
was the name of the program.
Yes.
And General Electric was building nuclear power plants in countries in the Middle East.
Yes, including in Iran. So, this is all. And by the way, and again, it's so crazy also because Israel has nuclear weapons. They have about 100 to 200 nuclear warheads. Obviously, the U.S. has thousands. So why is it that Iran is not allowed to have them? I mean, that's the other question here that people need to ask themselves. Why can the U.S. tell one country you can't have them, but you can have a bunch? It's ridiculous. I mean, the world cannot run this way. And we're heading towards disaster because the U.S. has decided it can try to control the entire world, and that is not sustainable or desirable.
And along this same vein, here, folks, we are here on this program connecting the dots. Attorney representing a student protester detained by federal immigration agents. Michigan-based attorney Amir Makhled was detained by federal immigration agents while returning home from a family vacation in the Dominican Republic on Sunday at the Detroit Metro Airport. Makhled, who is a U.S. citizen, attempted to pass through customs with his wife and children. The rest of the family was available to enter the country, but when Makhled's turn came, he overheard one of the agents call for assistance from the Tactical Terrorism Response Team. And Dan, it's not only happened to him, it happened to you, and it also happened to Danny Shaw, Professor Danny Shaw. It happened to him in Chicago. I think it happened to you in Florida.
It happened to me in Chicago. It's happened to me in Florida. It's happened to me in New York. About half the times I come back to the U.S. from out of the country, I am subjected to secondary interrogation, meaning they take me, back and question me. Sometimes it's a mere 15 to 20 minutes. In Florida, in Miami, it was 4 hours, and they took my phone and they took my computer. And my computer they gave back by the end of the visit, but my phone they mailed back a few days later. Most certainly they copied the entire phone. That's what they do. They copy about 30,000 phones a year. See what the US is doing now. I mean, they've done it to some extent over the years, but I mean, the truth is, this is fairly new. I mean, I used to travel all the time internationally. I never worried about this. This was never a concern of mine. I was never pulled over for years and years. It's only been in the last, I believe, I have to think about it, really 2 years or so, 2.5 years that I've been started to be pulled over like this. What the U.S. is doing now is doing through customs and immigration what they can't do outside of it, okay? What a lot of people don't realize is, and this isn't inevitable that this is the case, but under U.S. law as it stands, until you get through customs immigration, you're not in the United States. You are considered to be at the border.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, your rights, your full constitutional rights, are not applied to you. So, for example, if you go out, your door, you have a right. I believe it's Fourth Amendment right against illegal searches and seizures.
Mm-hmm.
That's not true at customs. They can seize your phone or computer without cause.
Mm-hmm.
Again, they can hold you for many hours without a lawyer. And so what they've decided to do, they've kind of woken up to, wow, this is a lot of power we have even over U.S. citizens. So they're using this now to harass people whose political opinions they don't like. They're going to do things to you there they cannot do normally in this country. And it really is a disgrace. After 9/11, a lot, there was some talk amongst Congress about changing this because a lot of Congress people didn't realize how much power customs had at the border
Mm-hmm.
areas. And there was some talk that Congress might pass a law saying, no, you can't do there what you can't do outside it,
Mm-hmm.
But then they decided not to do anything about it, and that's where we're at. But we really need to fix this. People shouldn't, because it's a fiction, right? If you're at the Atlanta airport, you're still in the United States, right?
Right.
If you're in the Florida airport, you're in the United States. It's a fiction that you're not really in the U.S., right? And so they need to fix that. But again, we're not anywhere near the point that's going to be fixed. They've decided to really exploit that loophole and go after people. And again, we were talking before the show, Wilmer. I have to be very thoughtful about whether I'm going to do an international trip. And by the way, it doesn't matter where I go. I could go to Canada, and if they decide they don't like me, they can still go after me in customs at the Canadian border, right? I need to really think hard whether it's worth doing the international trip and dealing with that, harassment.
Mel W., thank you for that generous super sticker. Greatly, greatly appreciate it. With all that's happening, is this evidence of war on American soil? Possibly. If I understand the question, Mel, I think what you're asking is this evidence of war against Americans? I'm having trouble reading this. I think you're asking, is this an evidence of an attack on Americans on American soil? If not, Mel, my reinterpretation is still a good question. Dan, I say yes. What say you?
Well, yeah, of course it is. And again, I think Trump's statement that he made that you've already highlighted, where he said he loves the idea of sending some American prisoners to this prison in El Salvador, where people we know are being tortured. Okay, it shows you where he's coming from. This is the leader, right? This is the top leader of the United States, and he is saying he doesn't care about the well-being of his own citizens, of certainly of certain citizens that he doesn't like, that he'd be willing to send them to be tortured in another country. It is a war against us, and that war is going to grow, and it's going to grow as the economy gets worse, as the social fabric unravels. We already have a police state in place, and there are some limits on it. Although, again, those limits seem to be crossed quite a bit. But, when things get tough and chaotic, they will clamp down even harder. And I think that time is coming. In fact, Trump signaled it when during the opening of his new term in office, he said he may need to use the Sedition Act, I believe of 1778, to
Mhm.
go after people. Believe me, that act, which is very old, has barely ever been used because it really allows a suspension of constitutional rights, but it can be used, and it can be used without much of a pretext. And if he just declares there's an emergency and he wants to start arresting people for thought crimes, he has a certain ability to do that, and he has signaled he's willing to do that. So I would say there's great danger ahead for all of us.
And folks, a couple of things. First of all, Dan, can you give us a couple more minutes?
Yes, I can go till 4. So
Oh,
4 more minutes. Yes.
okay, I appreciate that. And folks, I know Dr. Kavanaugh had to leave us early and very abruptly yesterday. All is well in the Kavanaugh home. There was a mishap that occurred. They were able to resolve it. I'm not going to put Dr. Kavanaugh's business out there, but they were able to resolve it, and all is well in the Kavanaugh household. We are very glad. Thank you all for your prayers for the Kavanaugh family. And quickly, Dan, going back to Israel and understanding that how the state of Israel was born out of the Holocaust in Germany during World War II. And I asked this question a lot, and a lot of Zionists can't stand the question: how can a people subjected to such atrocities then turn and subject another group to such atrocities?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. One would think there'd be a certain level of empathy, of course, that would prevent them from doing that. Now, interestingly, it should be pointed out, most Holocaust survivors that I hear speaking are against what Israel's
Yes,
doing. I should just say that, right? People
yes,
who have actually experienced that tend to be against it, right? But you're right that Israel has justified its existence based on the Holocaust, and yet it's visiting a Holocaust on other people. And again, I'm not the only one saying that. There are many Jews who are saying that. There are some Holocaust survivors using that language, that it's another Holocaust. Sadly, many, the Zionists who are participating in this use their victimhood as victims of the Holocaust to justify doing this against the Palestinians, even though the Palestinians had nothing to do with it. Right? It'd be one thing if they did it against the Germans. It'd be wrong, but still, you'd at least be able to understand it. But that is the logic behind it. Like, well, we went through all this, and this was terrible, and so somehow we're justified in doing this against others. Obviously, it's strained logic, but that's the view. I mean, obviously, we see this in small ways in our own lives. You see the guy who's kind of abused at work, and he comes home and abuses his family, right? And
mm-hmm.
the kid who abuses the dog. I mean, that happens. Sometimes great suffering can produce very empathetic people, and sometimes it can produce people who go on to abuse others. I mean, but again, I should note those who actually suffered from the Holocaust in general, people like Norman Finkelstein, whose
Yeah.
family survived the Holocaust, or Gabor Mate, and others are very much say, I don't want any part of this. We don't want to be part of a Holocaust. Just because our family suffered it, we don't want this for other people. And
which
that
is
should be
which is
said.
evidence of how the Zionists have co-opted Judaism in order to justify or rationalize their settler colonial white supremacist agenda.
Yes, and it's a real travesty. Now, every religion has this problem, right? Every religion has
Mhm.
people who misuse their religion to do horrible things, and this is a great example of that, right? And again, my hats off to the many Jews who are opposing this. I was just at the rally against the national march against the war in Gaza, and there are many Jews, there are many Orthodox Jews who are opposing the war, and you know, those are the best people in the world, who do that.
Professor Dan Kovalik, I'm going to get you out on time. Greatly, greatly appreciate your time as always. Stay safe. And as always, my brother, look forward to having you back.
You too, Wilmer. You're a good man. I always appreciate it. I'm always here
Thanks,
for
Dan.
you. All
Thank you,
right.
Dan. All
Take
right.
care. All right.
Family,
Bye-bye.
folks, before we get out of here, I need to take a moment to talk directly to you all. We are building something incredibly, incredibly powerful. We are building something incredibly, incredibly special here with connecting the dots. And we need you all to not only watch this, but to be a critical part of this. We're pushing hard. We are really, really pushing hard to get to 10,000 sponsors, subscribers on the YouTube channel. We're almost at 7,000. We've covered a tremendous amount of ground just in about 2 weeks. As we've really started this appeal, we've been able to cover a tremendous amount of ground getting to 10,000. But now we really need to dig in. We really need to push. So if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button. Please follow us on Facebook. Stay connected. Hit the subscribe button on YouTube. And final point here, listen, if you're just joining us, if you're new to the game here, maybe you've missed a few episodes. I'm telling you right now, go back, check out the archives, binge watch this, because there are some of the sharpest minds. I mean, sharpest minds that are out here on the landscape today that I am very blessed to interview on a regular basis. And these are the sharpest minds from all around the world. And folks, they are breaking it down. They are helping to connect the dots in a manner in which you will not hear any place else. So because this is not just a show, this is a conversation. This is a dialogue. This is an open and free exchange of ideas. And we're building this together. So we got to get on the same page. Join us. Stay with us. Please help us out. We got to keep this thing growing. And with that, I will say to you all, thank you today for joining me. Thank you for listening. Thank you to Professor Dan Kovalik. Thanks for listening to the Connecting the Dots podcast with me, Dr. Wilmer Leon. New episode tomorrow. Please follow, subscribe, leave a review, share the show. You can find us on social media. All the links are below in the show description. And remember that this is where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge. Talk without analysis is just chatter. And we don't chatter here on Connecting the Dots. See y'all tomorrow. Until then, I am Dr. Wilmer Leon. Have a blessed remainder of your day. Go watch some of this Masters coverage. Have a great one. Peace. I'm out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.